you know, brands have big moments when they do things for the first time as the first brand to touch an internet thing. So we didn't invent it. It was happening on its own, but the craving was there. So as we led into it, we became kind of like a poster child for this analog horror movement. And so too did other brands, as they do. And then the White House. So are we at a bubbling point where like I do think that that's going to cause a negative taste in their mouth for analog horror potentially if they keep rolling into this. If they keep acting like the war's a video game and it's this horror movie, then people are going to be like, yuck, that's my real life. I don't want to support that in my side time when I'm reading a story that's supposed to make me feel good or like distract me from the world. It's like, it's watching everyone and their mother go, this worked for me or for them. Should I just copy it? Well, if everyone's going to do it, then everyone's going to get sick.
All right, Hip Replacement, episode number 51. Kyle, we were talking off mic about the proliferation of holes being dug in the world at the moment. I mean,
that was a turn of phrase.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, what can you say? Call them like you see them.
Sure.
We are here with Ryan Benson, third of four core editors at Silence Brand. Am I right?
Yes. You're getting all of us. Yeah. Picking us off one by one.
Well, you guys are doing outstanding work, and so hopefully everybody has tuned in to Silence Brand at some point or another after our previous appearances. But in any case, Ryan, welcome. You call yourself a social media menace. And given some of the stories about the menace of social media lately, I wonder how like the reflection has been of late.
I'm sorry. Generally to anyone watching this, I'm sorry. I get texts on the daily that are like, you did this, by the way. And then it'll be like a White House link. And I'm like, oh my God. Okay. So put me in the Hague. I don't know. Like,
well,
sorry.
Okay. When you put it that way, then maybe you should do some time.
Listen, there's like a weird phenomenon. People keep like, I love when people send me like ChatGPT generated text and they're like, why does this sound like you? I'm like, well,
oh my God.
I'm not saying anything, but like,
I'm also not saying it does. You know, like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we are. You know, it's funny. There's a. This is an interesting thing, right? The strategist Steve Bryant, who writes a newsletter called Delightful, wrote over the weekend that the reason that coders love LLMs so much is that they allow all of the drudgery to be taken away and for the soulful part of the work to exist. And for writers and creatives, it's the opposite, right? All of the soul gets sucked out and you're just left with drudgery, which I thought was a pretty canny observation. But it is certainly true that we are all, you know, guilty to some degree or another of informing the tone of those megalothical machines. What do you disagree? Oh, okay, sorry. I thought you were going to try to say that you were blameless.
I was going to say us all being people who, for our own work, well, under our own name or for a client, is around communication, and that is things that are like technically, because you put it online, it is part of the food for the machine. Even whether I put in there or not, because I know somebody else and people have told me they put my words in there. So they are teaching it, blah, 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 blah. So like, also, as a result of that, it is doing that. Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, one thing that I specifically notice is like when people just like, it's the lackluster uses of these products. Like when they're just like, write this for me. And then they take it wholesale and just run with it. Those feel the most like the words that I was typing for businesses like 10 years ago than anything.
That's really interesting. You're right.
Sure.
And I'm like, is that just the way we talked? Or is this all based off of stuff that was already on the internet, meaning things that we contributed to? I think about it a lot.
That's interesting. It's like the thought that you've become, not only have you become uh what's the word, like parodied or denuded, but you've become perfunctory. It's like we're now our witticisms are now the base case for everybody else.
And they're like almost being used against us.
I often say that we, like, when you go to Cannes, the big festival of advertising in Cannes every summer, you come back having a really acute sense of needing to reinvent your vocabulary because you've heard the terms parroted back to you to such a great extent that you're just
boy.
okay, I can never say this again. And I think, it's like
Authenticity.
well,
Right.
I mean, the worst, but the we saw with Keith McNally's, I don't know if you've seen Keith McNally's Instagram rules about words that you can't say anymore over the last few weeks, but like I think this idea of those things that we default to all the time is becoming more and more a sense of what people are, they're aware of their contributions to it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't know, Kyle. I will take personal responsibility for apropos and corollary being used by the
Okay.
by the LLMs.
I'll allow it.
My linguistic crutches.
Yeah. It's like
Pause.
I feel like it's like when you, at least when I've been a social media manager, like I leave little fragments of myself behind in all of the accounts that we've built. And then it's like that, but like the baseline for every brand all at once.
Right.
Where did all of you get this playbook?
Yeah. But it's also like, it's even, I mean, to that point, like it's really interesting because like you are, if you've worked with big enough companies, and I'm sure Ryan, you've had a very similar experience, that sort of like way of speaking then proliferates a whole type of company. And like, because it happens with them, like, let's say it is like, I'm making this up, but like Louis Vuitton inside of the whole LVMH portfolio, and you do the voice for that. And then all of a sudden, Tiffany is like, oh, that's a really good voice. Can you teach us how to do it? And then so everybody then within there is doing, so then all of fashion then is doing it. So like, not that was me, there are other brands that have done that for, but like it is a really funny thing.
Well, it's interesting to think about it in terms of business cycles. Your Louis Vuitton example reminds me of something I just heard today. Chris Black was talking about how he saw the Marc Jacobs Sofia Coppola doc that came out maybe over the weekend, whatever it was. And he pointed out that Louis Vuitton, until Marc Jacobs showed up, didn't make clothes, which I didn't know. And he learned it in the documentary. I wasn't aware of it either. And it's interesting to think, like, the way all of these companies naturally operate is where you see opportunity, you gravitate towards it, right? Marc Jacobs made clothes before for Perry Ellis. He goes to Louis Vuitton. Louis Vuitton says, hey, make clothes. And they step into that opportunity. The reason all of these companies sound the same is because that tone, because the two of you, with probably help from me, proved that it worked a number of years ago, and now we're suffering the consequences of it. I guess the question I wonder, though, is like, does it, through Keith McNally's esque actions, does it, or even just our own realizations, that are we reaching a stopping point? As a social media menace, do you feel like, all right, I have to stop menacing and start doing something else?
Well, I have to say, anytime a client comes to me and they're like, we want to do the XYZ, and they're like picking through my book like it's a flash set at a tattoo shop, they're like, we want that.
That's a great analogy.
It came to me just now. It was really good.
Yeah, it's really good.
That's a good one.
But like, I have to tell them, are you in the same set of circumstances? Do you have the same people looking at you? Do people feel the same way about your brand? The answer is always no. I had a boss before I worked and did Nutter Butter. I still had it in here. I could still be absurdist. I had a boss ask me, like, should we be Wendy's on Twitter? And like, that question alone is laughable, but we were a nonprofit trying to stop military members from killing themselves. So I don't think.
I mean, not even like the.
I don't think it was right there, but that was proof to me early in my career that question will come up 100% of the time.
And it's such a it is laughable. It's ridiculous. It's just like, here's a really good example to that I just have to say, because like I've been in that situation too, where I'm like, you don't know what you're asking,
Yeah.
and you would hate it, and it would never happen. For example, there was a brand I worked for in the early 2020s, and like that was around the time when Snickers did a stunt. I think it was on Twitter where it was like,
Oh, I know the one.
yeah, about like we remove the vein or something. It was something about acknowledging the vein in the Snickers,
Yeah.
and it went very, very viral.
Yeah.
And a big executive, if not maybe the CEO, was like, "Why aren't we doing this on our socials?" And I had to be like, "Guys,
do you have a dick vein in your product?"
I was like, what are you getting at here? Are you saying I want this attention, which I think is what you're saying?
Yes.
Or are you saying we want to post about, the body parts that we don't have and the intimate body parts at that? And it's like, guys, you cannot have both. You cannot have big viral splashy moment without being like, we're gonna go dick on Maine, which I know you, big company that has a lot of investors, and we can't even talk about screen time. You're not going to talk about that. No, leave.
Yeah, it's a painful conversation, and then you just go like, why did I have to do that thing that made people know that I'm capable of this?
Yeah. And then,
okay, so now
you have to do something like that, and then it goes poorly, and then you get in trouble. When it was there, it was like, guys,
because they're like, what? I don't understand. Like, you did it before. Like, well, it was a very different set of circumstances.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I guess I'm curious how you'd live that down then, Brian. I'm now understanding the Nutter Butter reference from before we started recording. So you're Nutter Butter, eh?
Yeah, I was the gear in the machine.
I don't mean that you still are. I mean that you were.
Yeah. Well, I turned it from being like a playful meme account into like an analog horror day, frightening, scary, gross. I don't even know what to call it anymore. It's all of the above.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. I appreciate. I have to say I appreciate Nutter Butters for being vegan. They help me out a lot on my
and kosher.
my sober
and
vegan
kosher.
Februaries and Octobers. Okay, that's interesting. Let's use that then as a pivot point to go to one of our generational topics here, because hip replacement, of course, is the conversation between generations X, Y, and Z. The back rooms. There is some non-analog, but certainly horror, generationally based, I would argue, horror content.
Absolutely.
And the film is coming out, and I know all of us having touched on the entertainment world a little bit, I wonder where you guys sit in the back rooms.
Like in the camp for supporting the movie, or where we exist physically in the back room? Okay. Right.
Whichever you prefer.
I did make a piece of content once. I'm pretty sure that had a Nutter Butter in the back rooms.
Not surprised by that at all.
Very well. I like to imagine that I see the back rooms as, sometimes I think you can get to the back rooms through the bathroom aisle in like a Fred Meyer or a Safeway, like that aisle that goes back to the back, but like halfway there's the bathroom, and a little bit further is like the staff lounge. Remind me where Fred Meyer's is geographically in America. It's not where I'm from in the Northeast. Anybody know? So I was from Idaho, and they had them there. And they also had them in Oregon.
I think it's more West Coast.
The West Coast. That makes sense.
But West Coast, because there's not a lot in California. Well, there's not a lot in Southern
California.
But there are some.
And there are other.
But I feel like I've seen them in like Northern California.
I think I bought a pair of rubber boots at a Fred Meyer outside Portland, Oregon once.
That's probably true. Did I just like out myself as like a Westerner, a West Coaster?
Sure.
I mean, listen,
West Coast, okay.
We're all geographically dislocated from our natural states these days. Anyways,
I'm in the back rooms, like I've been saying.
Well,
okay. No, but I'm also curious, like the idea of this social media phenomenon, and maybe the backrooms isn't exactly that, but I think it's analogous, becoming the platform for which we now have to gauge the future of Hollywood. I think is pretty interesting, and it especially because it's one that it isn't narrative, right? It's not like a piece of definitive IP. It's more like just a feeling or a vibe. And I think that's very, I don't know. I mean, it's millennial coded for sure. It's Gen Z coded, I would say. And it's confusing to me because
reboot.
Right.
Which is something.
Which is good. Which is definitely good. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm very curious about how they're going to touch on this thing. Like, I feel like typical Hollywood, typical boardroom, typical writer's room have difficulty interpreting these things that apply to everyone.
Someone's at the door, Kyle.
Yeah, Kyle, you have a visitor?
Sorry.
But because
it's Slenderman. Okay.
It's the writer of the back rooms. He would like,
yeah, exactly.
Please don't finish the sentence. No, I was just gonna say, like, I feel like sometimes they interpret them as like they apply to one very specific target audience person or something, and then they shape the whole thing from that one viewpoint instead of realizing something like the back rooms is, which I'm not saying that this has happened. I haven't seen the movie, but the backrooms is like a universal truth. Like, everybody has a way in and it means something to everybody. That's why it kind of floats on as this like this thing that exists for everyone. So I'm curious I hope that they do it justice, is what I'm saying.
I think they will. I mean, I think they will. I think the thing that's really interesting, and like Ben, you sort of mentioned this in a way, is that like idea of like, I mean, I think it's very Gen Z, definitely more Gen Z than millennial, but I do think an interesting thing about it is that like the Backrooms, it is wholly new IP, yes. However, I do think like a really fascinating aspect of it, which it was somebody in my comments who on yesterday's post brought something up kind of about this, is that like it may be new IP, but like it is sort of dialoguing with which the movie is not going to get into this. And if it does, I will be shocked and I will be so tickled. Is that like the whole like thrust of the horror and like what makes it scary and disconcerting and the idea of liminal spaces and all that stuff is this idea of sort of like, you know, the sort of like lost spaces in America and the sort of like the vacancies that come with, you know, economic hardship, et cetera, and sort of like being lost in a waiting room, and like this sort of like this cycle of a whole generation or generations of sort of like economic loss in a lot of ways. And like the movie is not going to be about that. The short films are not about that. However, that is what it is directly dialoguing. It's dialoguing with this aesthetic of, you know, post 2008 like economic crash, and if not earlier. And like that's what it's talking about, is like, to that point of the Fred Meyer, we've all been in that back room where it's like, well, this is a part of the church that nobody goes to because we don't have room to put anything in it. All right. And like, it's fucking weird. And you run around it and then you leave because something echoed too loudly and you got scared.
One of the corners was a little too dark and I thought too much about it.
That's a very American experience, I think.
Yeah. Like, if you think back to the last time that malls were in a situation that they are now, it was when I was growing up and when I was visiting them, and when they were like daycare for kids whose parents don't have somewhere better to send them.
Right.
So it was like, oh, you're gonna go hang out with your friends? Like, my mom will drive. My mom will drive us to the mall and pick us up. We'll hang out at the mall. But half the stores in the mall have closed because we're in the middle of a recession. We don't understand what that means as kids. So it's like, haha, silly, weird. There's stuff in that store, but it's closed. Like,
yeah.
You know, it's the backstory to the back rooms that is very much real.
Well, okay. So speaking of that provides us with a pretty interesting pivot, Ryan, to something that you sent, which was this video from TikTok analyzing the Iraqi or the Iranian, you know, propaganda slopaganda, which is in dialogue not only with all of the U.S.'s previous incursions into you know, dubious wars, let's call it, Vietnam through to Gaza, but also with Epstein Island, and the sense that like this is all part of a sort of a general moral rot in American history, I would say. But then again, it's in Persian. Is it Persian that the Iranians speak? I should actually.
Yes.
Well, they've been making a lot of propaganda in English.
Yeah,
too.
all of that is in English for sure.
But so in any case, you said if you want to talk about this, and of course we do, because
No, this is totally on par.
it's very apropos.
Mm-hmm.
But what was it that which back room there do you engage with most directly?
Oh my God.
Is it the Statue of Liberty with the head of Baal, in other words?
Well, okay. One thing I feel like I am obsessed with is that they're making the propaganda in English, and it's extremely legible, and they're using things that they're making Lego movies just like the White House is, except they're like 10 times as nuanced. They contain 10 times as many facts, and like they're meant to be like teaching you something, because the White House's versions are not.
Right.
I'm kind of obsessed with how far they're going into the narrative of like these things we've kind of known about Epstein. If you've been on I guess if I was explaining this to my mom, I'd be like, so mom, the internet has known who Jeffrey Epstein is and his crimes for a long time past when we've actually just been talking about it on the news.
Literally decades.
Yeah. So Iran knows too. And they're telling us that they completely understand everything that he's done, enough to plug it into, like, are they using an AI tool to make this? Like, that's a prompt.
Absolutely.
So they've detailed the prompt. Make sure that Donald Trump's Lego hand is moldy and falling off. Like, it's just incredibly nuanced and detailed and targeted. And like, if I was going to give him a report card, which is not in the business of giving report cards on war and propaganda, but like some of the better propaganda I've seen.
I mean, it's an interesting media moment in that regard, because like, this is look.
Also, like, the war is no longer a physical fight.
Exactly.
It's happening on Twitter.
And that is not new either, but like we're seeing it play out in a way that sort of takes what was happening. Like, if we remember, I think this is also not the first time in my memory where it really had a breakout in this sort of like positionality was Russia and Ukraine on Twitter. Like, remember that being a very specific moment of them airing each other's shit out on that space and like showing receipts, which is really interesting. And now we're doing this in a different way, which is the same thing but in a different form. And like, what feels really different about this one to me, and like I think that obviously the slop-aganda of it all is just, meeting the White House where it is and sort of speaking its language and showing that it can do it better, which is, hey, really good. But I think the thing that makes it a bit different, and that I think that it makes all of this even more fascinating, is that like, in a way, it sort of turns this moment. Obviously, it's not great. It sort of turns it into almost like a reality show type thing, in the sense of like, it's like a Real Housewives reunion where it's like, look, I've been watching your show and I can tell you exactly, like, it's there is like, Twitter is history. Almost, exactly. It's like they're both like Real Housewives going back and forth, and like Iran is like beating the shit out of the wife of Potomac or whatever. Like, she's getting her ass beat because she's not rising to the occasion and showing up with real things to say. And Iran, unfortunately, is showing up with some very real things that put it all into contrast or into context, let's say. And that then, makes a lot of those things sort of collapse. Hopefully, but who knows?
They're not putting up a good fight to it. Let me just say that.
No, that's true.
Who the U.S. is not putting up a good fight? Yeah.
Well, I mean, the most fascinating thing about the current administration is that they are the legacy of capitalism and corporate business in this country, and like, they're doing the playbook as far as I've ever learned it to a T. Which I learned it
from you, Dad. Yeah.
Literally, I learned from people like Donald Trump to hold secrets, to spin them as lies, to tell people different news, to keep them from asking about things, especially as you're headed toward like the week, like a 5-day pause on the war to keep the stock market trading. Weird. Wonder where I've seen that before.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, it's an impulsiveness and a
very CEO.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's fascinating, unfortunately.
Because I spend so much of my time just thinking about strategy. I just like
and then there is none.
and then exactly. And then I drop into this world where it's just zero gravity, and you're like, all right,
it hurts.
Well,
when you're like, oh man, if we would have just stopped for like a 5-minute conversation on how we were going to send that tweet, it could have been better.
Right.
I've been at a table before with a boss who is like angrily responding to comments on Facebook. And I've been like, oh, maybe don't put an exclamation point at the end of that. Maybe we can just soften it a little bit. I don't know that this is the hill to die on. So I cannot imagine doing that. And I've seen the videos where there's literally like a White House aide like interpreting from Donald Trump as he's like, we will not stand down. Yeah, I like that.
Good impression.
Yeah, it is a good impression.
I've watched too much of it.
Oh my God! Speaking of impressions, by the way, I'm gonna change to a lighter topic because it definitely gets into this a sort of another thing. The New York Times over the weekend, Nikolaya Rips wrote in the opinion section about how improv sucks, but everybody should do it. And the reason that it comes up is that one of the people that she cites in this improv class that she took, was a very good parodist. Did great impressions. It feels like we are moving into a world where you kind of need that improv skill to just simply like roll with the move. Yeah, exactly. Like to be a part of that. And I wonder to what extent the we start to see kids being instructed in that level of rhetorical thinking, or whether they're just getting it already from osmosis. Are we giving it to them already?
Yeah,
they're getting it.
No, I mean when you like, not to give people any more power, but like when you have people on camera on the news doing something a certain way every day,
right,
that will just translate. Like I remember doing Obama impressions just because he was the president. I remember like doing things that my parents would listen to. I would that was my basis, my bank for doing impressions. So it was a lot of like world events, the things that adults are talking about. There's definitely some osmosis there.
Yeah.
The other thing about it is I also think that what's really interesting about that story, which I did not read, but I saw it and I was like, that's true. I can agree with that.
Clocked.
Is that like, is that I think two things. Number one, to your question, Ben, is that I think kids, like if you've interacted with or seen any kids' faces online, they deeply are funny and weird and like they know how to riff in a way that I think sort of it is bakes in the thing that you were sort of talking about, Ryan. I think the other thing is that I forgot what it was. It'll come back to me. Damn. Train ran right away out of the station.
That's okay. I do feel like I was watching a video. I mean, I read an article. Kidding. It was a TikTok. I was watching a TikTok that made a really great point the other day that was like, as much as we love third spaces.
That's kind of that. Sorry to interrupt you, Ryan, but just that right there, I think is kind of amazing. Well, just like the idea that I read a TikTok article.
I was listening to an expert on the news.
It's real. Well,
no. Well, I mean, it. Sorry, I want to get back to your point, but as a quick digression, it's a little bit like this: our audiobooks reading kind of thing.
Yeah,
right? I mean, is watching a TikTok the same as seeing an article? It
depends on the way that it's read, I think.
Depends on who is delivering it.
Yeah. But when I was growing up, I remember that like the Today Show would bring on like their cardiologist who hasn't seen a patient in 4 years because she's just a spokesperson now.
Listen, Dr. Oz is he's the head of human services now. So, don't you impugn him.
Listen,
he's keeping us safe or
watching
something.
my parents do a 360 on Dr. Oz was not on my bingo card, but neither was him being installed into the federal government.
Fair.
What were we talking about more importantly, not Dr. Oz?
I remember what I was going to say. If I want to get that out really quickly.
Get back into it.
Okay, so the other thing about improv and young people is like I think that like it also plays into this larger idea of like what happened to all the comedy movies and like that sort of thing is like where are they, and like that's because I think comedy has sort of become a part of the fabric of society in a lot of ways. I mean, again, look at the shit post by the White House. Look at the brands.
Elon Musk bought Twitter, he made comedy legal again. So
exactly.
it's
like
a really big
so
day
many
for
of
us.
the brands, and like honestly, probably like Ryan, your work, my work, and like a lot of people who have had those positions have had backgrounds in comedy, which now made everybody comedian in a lot of ways. And there was a time where like people were getting hired by brands and whatever to be that voice, and they were comedians or the spokesperson or whatever. So like sort of comedy now, like the reason why there aren't movies is because everything is comedy in a lot of ways. And unfortunately, in ways, well, that's also why it's gotten replaced by horror, which unfortunately is also becoming everything now. But I think that is why, like, kids won't need a training in it, because like that is just like the fabric of how things go in a lot of ways.
I do think there's a certain requirement of like if I was not silly goofy for the last 10 years of my life,
absolutely,
I would have committed murder, homicide. So I think it's like a coping mechanism. I stay silly goofy and nobody gets hurt. No, but I do think that it's like a coping mechanism in a lot of ways. And that video expert that I watched, read an article from, but watched a TikTok from, anyway, it was all about how like the craving for a third space is great, but like the way that we're restoring them right now doesn't include everybody, and they're still kind of exclusive. So this is a generation that's grown up with like no third space. Everything costs money. Their parents are probably struggling right now. If they don't laugh, they might die.
Right, exactly.
So I do think it's a coping mechanism in a lot of ways that keeps people going.
Absolutely.
So it's
that's like interesting. Yeah. No, that I think that point makes a lot of sense. It also makes me wonder. I mean, and Kyle, to your earlier assertion of the comedy to horror horseshoe, at what point do we, is there a moment that we cross the Rubicon and come back down on the other side of the horseshoe?
I think we might go somewhere else.
Well,
but I don't know.
Okay, well, so this is an interesting point, right? There was a piece that I read recently about how consulting firms have stopped looking for math and science graduates and are now really trying to recruit people with liberal arts degrees, because like this is people straight out of college, because those people have the ability to think rhetorically and have a variety of different interests and aren't as set according to sort of let's call it programmatic or math-based kind of logic. Where in an AI world where everything's a calculator, you need to be able to think around it like that. It's sort of interesting to think, if we go somewhere else, that one possibility is that we go back to Socratic debate and like real measured sort of discussion, right? All of this comedy and riffing as rhetorical device takes us back to a place where people are like, actually, it is okay to debate. And so we're going to now get back into more measured discussion. I, for one, would not put money on that, but I do think
that's a theory. I don't support it, but it's out there.
If the Jubilee videos indicate anything, that's not happening.
Yeah, but also, I mean, the funny thing is, like the Cal Newport piece over the weekend about how, in 1955, the president of the United States has a heart attack, and everybody loses their minds, and then the Surgeon General or his doctor or whatever gets up and is just like, this could have been prevented with diet and exercise, and that was the beginning of exercise culture, diet.
Right, it takes
a certain kind of diet culture, and Cal Newport's point is like, you can hit those moments of inflection and things can change radically in a way that don't seem possible while you're in the thing. And I don't have, like I said, I don't know what that's going to be. I don't know if I can see it, but it's happening in a way now, think about it.
But I don't think it's about, say, content. Like I do think that's happening now about positions of power. Like I do think in a lot of ways, like you're seeing, like, unfortunately, well, I don't think it matters, but like, well, it does matter. Like we're seeing like a place like Dubai, the energy getting sucked out of it and it's being rearranged now in Europe and other places, which is very interesting. That's one thing that's happening. But the other thing I think is also like, a critical thinking around energy, obviously, but then also around AI too. Like that is coming too. Again, if slopaganda is being used as a war tactic, why is a brand going to use AI? Like, that's like, why these
Wow.
things
That's actually
are,
that's
but like, that's
that's
like,
I
it's increasingly getting there. And I think this is becoming sort of like a fulcrum where things are going to change. Cause like, this is also happening at the same time as like more and more stories are coming out about people being like, AI being like one of the worst, lowest ranking of like, you know, positive or negative for people, and like people seeing it as a tool they're forced to use and they don't want to. So like, this is all building to like things about to change, to
yeah.
me at
yeah.
least.
What do you Ryan? It sounded like you had something
Well, yeah, I have
hot
some
to
like
jump on right there.
kind of back to our first point of like, did I do this? Oh no. Um
Let's
okay,
bring it back to you, Ryan.
this is not like a big head type of take. It's like a what have I done kind of thought. As Nutter Butter leaned into the online craving for analog horror, which mind you was 3 years ago,
Right.
not a lot of brands were in the space. So like that was there. Like, and brands have big moments when they do things for the first time as the first brand to touch an internet thing. So we didn't invent it. It was happening on its own, but the craving was there. So as we led into it, we became kind of like a poster child for this analog horror movement. And so too did other brands, as they do. And then the White House. So are we at a bubbling point where like I do think that that's going to cause a negative taste in their mouth for analog horror potentially if they keep rolling into this. If they keep acting like the war's a video game and it's this horror movie, then people are going to be like, yuck, that's my real life. I don't want to support that in my side time when I'm start reading a story that's supposed to make me feel good or like distract me from the world. It's like, it's watching everyone and their mother go, this worked for me or for them. Should I just copy it? Well, if everyone's going to do it, then everyone's going to get sick of it. So I do think we're watching a bubble happen.
Absolutely, exactly. And I think that's happened. Like, it's this really interesting intersectional bubble, because the other thing that's happening too is like masculinity and all that shit seems to be coming to a head because of shit like that. Because of like all the sort of tropes of like being sort of elevated as a part of this really misguided, really awful values. It's everything bad you can say about this conflict and about the White House. It is sucking in with it, you know, the bad video game shit, the AI shit, you know, male body horror.
Like,
if you like,
everything,
it's taking it's bringing it all together and really letting people see like
the worst way.
This is this all makes the worst possible whatever. Like, and people I think hopefully are seeing, oh wow, that's me. I don't want to be a part of that. Even on an aesthetic level, hopefully. And that I think can lead you to now being like, well, maybe I'm going to think on my own and question this and yada yada, and then maybe we'll have a thing. But like, I don't know. If we end up with another fucking No King's March, I'm gonna No King's March.
I kind of like the bright-sided nature of that. I enjoyed, like, I'm like, okay, girl who is going to be okay.
Right, yeah. I
think it's also, you know, it is interesting though, because it's at some point you just, but I think the human impulse is just to turn away, to turn off. And so it's also interesting to think like this doesn't necessarily have a continuation through some other similar thing. It could just have nothing. Like, people could just abandon the behaviors altogether, and that, which of course would be a net benefit when we talk about slopaganda and warmongering and idiocy, but also is sort of interesting to think like what would the implications of that would be for systems and economies that are built around its proliferation.
Well, so in college, I worked at one marketing agency, and I had a friend who worked at a different marketing agency. Little did I know, apparently we were butting heads. Like, that was a competition. She voted for Trump, and she made it this whole thing. Right.
Okay, so anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
She made it her whole thing. Like, she was like, I think I'm going to quit this marketing agency and go into the military because social media isn't going to survive. Social media is, mind you, this was 2015. So, how things have changed. And little did she know her candidate would take over the internet, actually. But her thought was by now we would be social media-less. It would be gone. It was stupid. It didn't serve a purpose. Nothing real happened online.
Oh my God.
but that didn't happen. So I have fear that it will turn into something worse first.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is the thing, right? It's and Kyle's heard me say this infinity times, but my belief about AI, generally speaking, is that it sort of recedes into the background as a layer of utility, where it powers everything,
Absolutely.
but isn't it
was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
When we kept it in the server closet and we were like, automations are automations, not intelligent
yeah,
beings.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, it's like it gets reclassified, or it just eventually becomes the really excellent calculator that it is, or the autocorrect
we're seeing them right now
saying
to
that I'm
point,
ducking
Ben.
angry at everybody.
Yeah, we're seeing them to that point right now, realize that like this is not a consumer facing product, and like a lot of like Sora disappearing, the erotic chat app from OpenAI, like, I think they're realizing, oh shit, we should have been selling to corporations.
This wasn't for the public in the first place. That was just an easy buck.
You're exactly right, Ben.
Yeah, but I wonder. I mean, so I think you make the same argument about social media, right? It's like every communication is inherently social. Every platform is inherently interactive. Every brand is inherently a publisher of some, opinion or whatever it is. And so, well, maybe, but
brand slop doesn't have to contain AI.
Yeah, but in any case, we there's a regression to a kind of a mean that is more healthy and more sane, and maybe that's the.
Well, can we bring back like the era of like GeoCities and local forums and places that you owned on the internet that were yours?
Well, we have it already. It's called Diner Goth, right? And it's
Discord servers.
You know the Diner Goth story. It's like where Yes, this is the one that was all over the internet. It was in the guy named Robert Mariani wrote in the New Atlantis about how subculture had essentially all melted into one thing, where now the like goth, which would have been a proud and distinct subculture, is now just part of a thing where it's like disaffected teenagers go to diners.
It's real too. Okay, I understand.
It's a really
it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what subculture has always been, right? Like, Syracuse, where I grew up in the 90s, the goths were all at Denny's, along with the straight edge kids, along with the skateboarders, along with the hip hop kids, because each of those was a subculture that didn't have enough critical mass on its own, so it ended up in these liminal spaces, and it all, to my dad, would have looked exactly the same. It's like they're the kids with the goofy outfits. Some of them have pancake makeup. Some of them have, shaved heads. Some of them have giant pants. They're all the same dumb kids, right? And this was a 2026 identification of that phenomenon from somebody who didn't seem to have participated in it as a kid. So it's like, all right, I get it. But anyway, Diner. I do think Diner Goth.
Are you talking about me? Me and my friends used to go to Sherry's. There was a cult like diner based on pie in the Northwest called Sherry's that I think they closed in the last couple of years. Very sad.
Was that like a Twin Peaks takedown?
Yeah. Their whole thing was pie. So like a Cheesecake Factory and a Denny's had a baby. Like late night diner and there's pie. So good.
Whatever happened?
They took it.
I agree. And maybe that's it. Maybe we're all going to come back to IRL moments centered around pie. And in fact,
well, it's cheap. I think part of it is that
pie restaurant,
you didn't have to spend a lot. It didn't cost a lot to occupy space in public with other people, so you could.
Sure. Well, that is the interesting thing, and you made this point early in the conversation. But the idea of a generation largely growing up without inexpensive third spaces, what happens when they discover those, and B, what happens when the economy responds to their discovery and starts to recreate them in some way, shape, or form. I think we've the big discussion at the moment is that we've optimized ourselves out of everything, right? Like Starbucks is going back to cafes because they made transactions so successful that it killed the vibe, and then nobody wanted the transaction anymore.
but they're calling themselves a third space while missing the critical
Right.
fundamental part of a third space, which means everyone should be able to use your bathroom.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, look, having been confronted with some pretty gnarly bathrooms over the course of my life,
Oh yeah,
I
no,
think,
a Starbucks bathroom is
there's
like the worst
That's a
place.
human
there's
experience.
there's a spectrum that needs to be,
That's the
understood.
fourth
And
place.
yeah.
Right.
All right, yeah.
But it's I think the interesting thing about that, even you have to pay to use the bathroom to use the space, is that I think it gets at a part of culture that, like, yes, this is based in economics and having to spend that money, blah blah blah. But I think this is also something that happens, I think, with Gen Z too. Generally, is like there's a sort of seeking for, they won't admit it, I don't think, but there's a sort of seeking of permission before doing something. Like it's to the point of that video I think you mentioned, Ryan, of like, everyone wants a third space until a homeless person shows up, is like, that is like, you could go outside and have a third space right now. You just have to go and do it. And like, I think that sort of lack of doing it is a sort of seeking permission, someone else to do it for me. And like, that comes from, I need to spend money. So like, that's sort of like, I want a third space, I want whatever. What they're saying is, I want money to be able to afford to sit down here, versus actually fucking doing it. And that's what drives me crazy about this.
Yeah. How many people do you know will go to a restaurant and they won't order something until they can see it physically on the menu? Have you ever watched a friend do that? Like, they won't order something if they know that they have it. They need to find it on the menu.
Wait, so you're saying that people will sit down at a place and go, I can't order a Coke unless I know that it's here, because what if they have Pepsi and I'm embarrassed type situation?
Yes. Oh, wow. Object impermanence.
I do think that younger generations were accidentally forced to ask. Like, we had to ask to go to the bathroom in class.
Well, it's also that seeking to not be embarrassed because someone might be filming you, which I fucking hate, but it's true.
I think
that too.
You hit on, Kyle, you hit on something a minute ago, which is that like the idea of needing to be given instructions on being able to do anything is to some degree at the heart of that. It's like you know that I will be emotionally and physically safe if I follow the instructions, and so let me make sure I identify what the instructions are before I do anything. I mean, obviously is a really terrible way to go through life from my old ass opinion, but also
tell me about it as someone
explains
who's
a lot.
With way too many of these people.
Yeah. I mean, that's a thing that's come up again and again in our conversations with young people who are in Gen Z, and like in these subjects. It was another story. What was it? It was about the sort of like, the extreme opposite of this is young people sort of like participating in prediction markets. But even that is like a bit of like, well, I'm not going to do it until I know it's real. And it's like, well, then I bet on it. Bet on the idea. You won't do it. You'll bet on the idea, which is short.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, the systems in play right now definitely thrive on a structure where people feel they need to ask for permission. They need to follow directions.
It's not as if some of these things aren't by design.
Right. No, they're definitely by design, and we were taught to think and act that way. So I do think there's like, but I think that has, like, that's a difference in past, like from past generations. So I think that is one way we see those play out.
It'll be interesting. I want to pose something to you guys. So I went to a meetup on Friday of podcast creators, and I ran into a woman named Phoebe Letts. Shout out Phoebe if you're listening. She mentioned listening to the podcast, which is why I shout her out.
Shout out Phoebe.
Phoebe's working. Shout out Phoebe. Shout out Harry Krinsky, who also talked about listening to the pod. In any case, Phoebe's working on a podcast, and I don't want to give too much away here, but which is about let's call it crisis around fertility and family planning, right? And my take on all of that is that you cannot time having kids, just like you can't time changing jobs or getting married or buying a house or whatever it is. I mean, all these things I've been lucky enough to do.
I love people that act like you can, though, and they act like they're like
but I think there's so much.
This
instruction culture gives you the sense that surely there must be a manual that gives you the exact right time to do it,
and there's a right way for everything,
and there is not, and so consequently, I guess, this is the reason I wanted to bring this up. One of the things that's happening here in New York is Mayor Mamdani is trying to put in 3K, maybe 2K, like childcare for very young kids.
Right,
And I heard
right.
yesterday on the radio that people are now thinking about starting families as a function of the city having that safety net.
Which is the point.
Is there, do we think there is a tipping point for younger people where they start to go, oh, I can do it without a safety net. I can do, and I don't just mean having kids, but just do anything without a safety net. What do they need to see in order to have that confidence?
Great question. I think that's a very good question. And I was,
not one that we're going to answer right now, obviously, because it's enormous. But
I think true. But I think the thing that came up to me when you were talking about this is like, there's been conversations for the past year, 5 years. I know it's been a while actually. Of like, there are too many people applying for jobs. Like, let's say like someone posts a job and like 1,000 people apply. That's not possible that like all those people are qualified, but everybody does it. And like, to me, what that is a reaction to is sort of seeking that permission of, this is how I get a new job. The same thing with like dating. I use this app. This is how I get a job. And you're not get a date. And you're not getting a date. And you're not getting a job because you're going by a playbook or by a system that doesn't necessarily work. And that's not how it's designed.
The playbook was written by the system and not any other metric too.
But versus like in reality, like how I have met a lot of people that I've dated, technically not Bobby because I met him on a dating app, but how I've gotten most of my jobs and how like we're talking about jobs a lot now. And like what we are talking about is like the way that you've gotten them is by going out. And I've told this to people all the time, is going out and getting a drink with friends and constantly talking about it and people listening and being like, oh, so-and-so is looking for somebody like this. And then you connect and then you up, like, that's just being fucking normal in a lot of ways. And I think again, to that permission of like, well, I got to apply for the job to get it versus talking to people and doing. Like,
that's
I think
true. There is a very large disconnect there to the human behaviors of picking up a job. Like I've always had success I mean, I have a very specialized knowledge and not every person starts before high school or like starts in high school in their professional career. But like just the little things I like to think have helped me get jobs, like emailing people before you apply and like trying to find the people who are actually hiring for the job, figuring out what their needs are and being like, you know what, I really do think that I could do this and I'm going to submit my application. Following up. Like there are like other steps that create success, but those aren't the ones advertised as like get a job.
Yeah, the soft skills that make you successful at life.
Yeah.
That you have to do. You cannot sit and wait for permission. Someone to tell you. You have to do it.
Oh, that's my theory. All right. Well, if there's one lesson that we're learning from Hip Replacement episode number 51, it's that if you want to do something, you got to just do it.
Just do it.
Do it.
Just do it.
Can you imagine? Nike's reporting, they're going to report their results from the last quarter, and their continuing failure to just do it is what's holding them back. Anyway. All right. Well, everybody, this has been Hip Replacement episode number 51 with Ryan Benson of the mighty Silence Brand Collective, social media menace he has proven to be throughout this episode. So, Ryan, thank you very much for being here. Where can the kids who are going to learn to do it from you find you?
So you take the word Ryan, my name, and you mix it with the word annoyance. You get Ryan Annoyance. You can find me anywhere.
Ryan Annoyance, and that's Ryan. Just for our listeners from the United Kingdom, that's Ryan with a Y, not one of these.
Like Ryanair, like Ryanair, but Ryan Annoyance.
He's got away with puns, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Well, Kyle, will be back next week with another episode of Hip Replacement. I'll be broadcasting live from California, which will be fun. And in the meantime, you can find us at hipreplacement.substack.com on all of your favorite podcast platforms. You can find Silence Brand at silencebrand.substack.com.
We have the website, but
or .net. Listen, let's get URL with ourselves here, guys. But in any case, Ryan, thanks for being here. Kyle, great to talk to you. See you next week.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.